My mother's voice pierced the muted hush of the hospital corridor. Javier, basta, not this again. Her palm was cool and trembling on my forearm, and I noticed she wouldn't meet my eyes. She wouldn't look at me, not really, not since the specialists said there was nothing more they could do for my father. The hallway reeked of antiseptic layered over old sweat and fear. Overhead fluorescent panels buzzed softly, the only constant in a world suddenly at odds with itself. My uncle Eduardo stood nearby, arms crossed rigid over his chest, jaw clenched in that way he had when he was fighting harder than the situation demanded. My sister Lucia, never timid, not even now, glared at me from the row of grey plastic chairs. "You should be with him, not running off with your ridiculous questions," she spat, as if words could bruise. "How do you think this helps?" I stood perfectly still, back flattened against the wall. Grief and clarity slid together within me like oil in water, swirling but always refusing to mix. I wanted to say I was sorry. I wanted to defend myself, but all I said was, "I have to do this, Lucia." My father's door eased open, my Aunt Pillar emerged, eyes glassy, hair fraying from its bun. "The priest is here," she whispered, voice catching on the word. "He's ready for you." But I hesitated, not out of fear, though fear was sharp in my throat, but out of guilt. I'd spent days scouring legal records and city archives. Even now, 2 floors below, I had a file of battered clippings, not any comfort to a dying man. I tried to explain, tried to tell them again and again why these stories mattered, how unmasking the corrupt men in Gran Via, the ones controlling the city's veins, could reshape everything. They laughed, or worse, ignored me. I stared at my mother, searching for softness, but she was a cold mask of worry and exhaustion. "Your father wanted better for you, Javier, a stable job, respect, all this. Chasing rumors, making a fool of yourself in the newspapers." Her words trailed off with the weight of so many bitter old arguments. Footsteps echoed from up the hall, the priest's silhouette growing larger, the cross swinging from his neck a metronome. My father would die here in this sanitized room, without ever seeing Madrid cleansed of its rot or his son recognized for anything but folly. I turned, unable to put voice to the apology, feeling it collapse inward like a punctured lung. I wanted to blame them for their smallness, their doubt, their need to cage every dream, but I knew most of all I blamed myself for not proving I could rise above it. With each step toward my father's deathbed, I promised. One day they would know what this calling truly meant. He passed that evening as the sun's last gold grazed the windows, breathing in with a shudder and never exhaling. The city changed, but not for me. For a while, nothing mattered but moving from one story to the next, letting grief hollow me out and fill me back in, piece by piece. My family avoided speaking to me about my work, and when they did, their voices lilted with a pity more stinging than derision. The old gossiping neighbors in Lavapiés nodded but didn't listen. I ate alone in cramped newsrooms, scanning the tape to see what I'd missed. For years, Madrid was my labyrinth, a tangle of stone and secrets, moonlit alleys where someone always waited. If the city taught me anything, it taught me how to persist, how to claw forward no matter who was watching. I spent nights drunk on espresso chasing whispers, the Armenian tycoon laundering money through Malasaña nightclubs, the ministry aide selling permits for new developments along the river, the Cuart brothers fixing football matches. Always there was someone laughing, always someone calling it fantasy. Once, in the dead of winter, my cousin Inia Cutes met me in a smoky bar off Atocha. "It's enough, Javier." "There are other jobs," she murmured, eyes darting to my battered notebook, spine bent from too much use, ink bleeding through the pages like bruises. "You're wasting your heart on this." "I need to see it through," I told her, "for Papa. For all of us." She shook her head, pitying. "Everybody knows you're chasing windmills, my Nino." Nobody wanted a crusader, not when he was family. Still, something changed after the funeral. The ache inside me stopped running in circles and started burning straight forward. I started sleeping at the newsroom, dogged editors learning to trust my instincts if not my timing. I filed stories no one else would chase, stories too dangerous, too thankless. There was a spike in robberies tied to the new mayor's cousin. The real owner of the casino near the Retiro was a fugitive. Whole lives were upended in the shadows, and I pieced them together, eventually threading knots the city's police wouldn't admit existed. I chased sources who feared for their lives, ducked into cabinas to leave cryptic voicemails, learned to trust nobody, not even myself. But victories were slow and Madrid was unkind. My byline appeared in La Voz, then disappeared under snide headlines by junior editors, then faded into blogs until even my mother thought I'd been fired. For every exposé, there were 3 other stories spiked for lack of proof, for a lawsuit threat, for fear of biting the hand that paid. Many times I almost gave up when rent was due and the landlords leered, when I found myself crouched under crime scene tape, watching police dismantle the evidence my sources bled to find. Then, 5 years after my father's death, one story refused to be silenced. It started with a woman in a sad red coat crying into her cell phone outside the Puerta del Sol metro. "You're the reporter, right?" she said, voice wrecked by tears and cigarette smoke. "I have something I have to show you." She led me quietly through the winding side streets until we ducked into her 4th-floor apartment. Images flickered on a battered laptop, municipal contracts, checks with the mayor's signature, security camera footage of cash changing hands in the dim-lit parking lot beneath Ayuntamiento. Her name was Marta Gutierrez. She'd lost her job, her brother, and nearly her home because of the crooked men who ran the city's veins. She pressed a trembling finger to each document, explaining, voice growing steadier, how the city's child nutrition funds had been siphoned off. Her eyes met mine, defiant. "I need you to show them, I need you to make noise." I promised, and for once I made no secret vows. I pulled the files onto 3 encrypted drives, buried hard copies in my old-school backpack, and walked out into the pre-dawn streets of Lavapiés feeling as though I had my father's ghost at my back. The next 6 months were a fever dream, tracing bribes, hiding from private investigators, working with a cautious, tight-lipped editor named Dolores who trusted me just enough to keep the story alive. Fear became a constant, paranoia so thick I staggered in broad daylight, always looking over my shoulder. Sleep was snatched in hour-long bursts. There were threats on my phone, dead air that suddenly clicked and hissed. Once someone slashed the tires on my Vespa after it was seen outside the government offices. I stayed with friends when I could, drank too much cheap whiskey to chase out the dreams, where Marta Gutierrez's eyes dissolved into the hospital fluorescent glare. Every time I faltered, the faces from home resurfaced, my mother's tired disappointment, my uncle's scornful laugh, Lucia's angry glare. Each memory pressed harder until only stubbornness carried me forward, and then the breakthrough. Anonymous banking records leaked through an old contact in the city's treasury. The major newspaper ran the front page, "Ayuntamiento corrupción, la ciudad vendida," below the fold, my byline. For once, no editor's alterations. No snide remarks from copy. The avalanche started. Prosecutors took up the case. Police raided city offices. Cameras swarmed outside as the mayor's cousin was led away in handcuffs, his designer coat rumpled and his eyes shrunken with sweat. Schools received funding that had been siphoned for years. Marta wept openly on air, clutching the hands of her son as if anchoring herself to reality. Still, the old calls didn't come. My family didn't write, didn't call, not even to ask if I was safe or proud or merely alive. But Madrid shifted around me, the streets tinny with the excitement of change. For the first time since childhood, I felt seen. Not as a punchline, not as an embarrassment, but as something nearer to what I'd always suspected I could be. Months turned, recognition gathered in relentless, uneven ways, a nomination here, a mention there. My name became a byword among young reporters. The city watched and it didn't forget. Then, 10 years after the morning my father left us, Lavapiés called me home. It was Lucia who rang, timing it perfectly for guilt. "The festival is next week. Mama is organizing the banderillas. Tia Pilla says she won't survive another year unless you bring good wine," she joked, voice tense enough that even her attempts at humor stumbled. When I arrived, Madrid was in the dried blood heat of August. The air from Chamartin station shimmered in oily waves. I carried a duffel bag, some books, copies of the magazine, bruised by travel but unbowed. Cal de la Fee, my childhood street, felt smaller. The old houses sagged inward, still painted the same stubborn creams and coral pinks, but the faces had sagged too. My mother opened the door with tears she tried to hide. "You're thinner," she scolded, but I saw pride crackling underneath. She took my hand, fingers rough but strong, and led me to the kitchen where the others waited. Lucia was there, more at ease than before, teasing me about the miracle of my return. Eduardo sat at the table, the ghost of his old scowl softened by new greys in his beard. It could have been awkward, but for the first time in years the room felt neither hostile nor cold. It was just family, older, wearier, but family. Dinner was heavy with familiar flavors, saffron and lemon, baked fish the way Papa liked it, wine poured in arc after arc, bittersweet with memory. Afterward my mother took me aside. "You've made something of yourself, Javier. We've all seen the stories. I heard the pride but also the regret for the years spent in silence. The festival came on a Saturday, the streets choked with bunting and raucous cheer. I walked among old friends and strangers, the sun baking every step, my name passing in whispers. Isn't that Javier Lopez, that journalist, the famous one? He took down the mayor, an incantation. What I didn't expect was the gathering at the community center that afternoon. I'd been told to stop by for something small, but the low balconies were crowded with neighbors, the air thick with applause and the scent of garlic and roasted pimientos. On a projector in front of everyone played footage from the main news broadcast, my interview recorded months earlier. My voice sounded strange in the echoing hall. I stood at the back, hands in my pockets, shrinking from the eyes, but Lucia caught my sleeve and dragged me forward. Let them see you, they need to know all of it. Someone was calling my name. Someone else clapped me on the back, telling me how their son had kept his scholarship, how their mother's clinic had reopened after years of threatened closures. Faces that mocked, doubted, scoffed, all now beaming, their pride genuine, their gratitude almost embarrassing. Then Eduardo, never the sentimental one, took the stage, squinting in the stark light. We all thought he was loco, he said, waving a hand broadly, too stubborn for common sense. Well, maybe the world needs a little less sense after all. Look what he's done, look what we've all been part of, even when we doubted. The room swelled, laughter skittering around the walls, applause louder than anything I'd ever earned in a newsroom. At the front row my mother sat, hands folded around my father's old signet ring, tears streaming openly. It was too much, my throat closed. For a moment I saw that hospital corridor, sterile, suffocating, full of the words I'd swallowed. I wanted to gather everyone together, to confess I still didn't know if the cost had been worth it. Instead, when silence finally fell, I found myself speaking. I only ever wanted you to see Madrid as I did, a place worth saving, worth fighting for. I lost a lot along the way, I lost all of you for a while, but dreams aren't ridiculous, they're contagious, they're necessary. Thank you for giving me the chance to return. A hush lingered. Then slowly Lucia's hand found mine, squeezing it until bones threatened to break. My mother's smile wobbled, transformed by pride and relief, her grief momentarily gentled. Outside, the city burned amber in the long sunset. The laughter faded, the music resumed, and I stepped outside into the crowd. The faces I passed, once my tribunal of skeptics, became a welcoming tide. Madrid was still stubborn and wounded and full of secrets. But for the first time it felt like home, the kind of home I didn't have to apologize for, the kind I could finally truly belong to. And as I looked up at the quilt of lights strung overhead, I knew that even if I left again, something inside me would always stay. This was the proof, the redemption, the return. There was nothing ridiculous about it.